the most brutal terrorist organization in history. ISIS was once shown as the richest and most powerful terrorist organization in history due to its wealth of $2 billion and having close to 70,000 militants. It once seized a considerable amount of land in Iraq and in Syria. So who established the bloodiest terrorist organization in history? Another question is, what was the purpose of this ruthless organization? For the answers to these questions, don't forget to watch the video until the end, comment for support and press the like button. The year 1979. With the Soviet Union's attack on Afghanistan on this date, the Muslim concept of jihad changed and left its place to armed resistance. After the occupation, many Muslims from different countries who opposed the occupation began to voluntarily flock to Afghanistan to support the Afghans. In mid-1980, while Osama bin Laden joined the resistance by crossing from Arabia to Afghanistan, he established a structure called Maktab al-Hidamat for material and moral assistance. While the structure was welcomed by the United States, which was fighting communism at the time it was established, it would turn into a terrorist organization called Al-Qaeda in the future. Osama bin Laden, who turned his direction to Arab lands after the end of the Soviet-Afghan War in 1989, stated that the holy lands of Islam were occupied, their riches were exploited, the Jews were supported, and the Muslims there were massacred by the occupation of Jerusalem. He was calling for action against the Americans to liberate these lands. Although Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, who was among the volunteers who came to Afghanistan during this period, did not meet bin Laden, he was very interested in the ideology of Al-Qaeda. In 1999, Zarqawi met with bin Laden in Kandahar and founded an organization called Tawhid and Jihad in Herat in western Afghanistan. This organization would evolve over time and form the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, in short, ISIS. After the US invasion of Afghanistan in 2001, Zarqawi realized that he could not live in Herat and moved the organization's headquarters to Iran and then to the north of Iraq. The organization started its resistance against the American occupation by seizing the remaining weapons, equipment, and ammunition from the Iraqi army, which was disintegrated with the American invasion of Iraq in 2003. Tens of thousands of young Muslim volunteers from Afghanistan, Chechnya, Kashmir, Bosnia, and neighboring Arab countries joined the organization, which made its name known in a short time. During this time, bin Laden repeatedly asked Zarqawi to oath allegiance to Al-Qaeda, while Zarqawi rejected this offer each time. As Tawhid and Jihad organization strengthened its name with the attacks it carried out against American soldiers in Iraq, it accepted bin Laden's last call for unity in 2004. However, there were strategic and ideological differences between bin Laden and Zarqawi. While bin Laden saw only the Americans as his enemy, Zarqawi was both the Americans and the Shiites who disturbed the peace in the region. America, which Zarqawi described as a distant enemy, was the clear target and would surely go away one day. However, the Shiites, whom he described as close enemies, were insidious and were waiting in an ambush. In January 2004, Zarqawi sent a letter to bin Laden and Shiites, saying Shiism is no different from idolatry. They formed an immoral partnership with the US to destroy Sunnism. They've been a sect of betrayal for ages, and offered cooperation to the leader of Al-Qaeda to kill the Shiites. But bin Laden rejected Zarqawi's offer because he saw himself as the unifier of Muslims. However, while the cooperation between the two organizations continued, Zarqawi changed the name of the organization to Al-Qaeda in Iraq. As Al-Qaeda in Iraq began to gain influence in the areas where the Sunni segment is concentrated, especially in the city of Al-Anbar, it also started to follow a brutal policy of violence against the Shiites. This attitude of the organization led to the start of sectarian conflicts between Sunnis and Shiites in 2005, while Al-Qaeda in Iraq killed nearly 1,000 American soldiers in its 189 attacks until 2006. It was time for America to say stop to Zarqawi. On June 7, 2006, Zarqawi and two senior executives of the organization lost their lives in the airstrike carried out jointly by the Iraqi and American army in Hip. After Zarqawi's death, Abu Omar al-Baghdadi took over the head of the organization, while al-Baghdadi declared in late 2006 that he did not recognize the Iraq state and that he had established the Islamic State of Iraq. While a cabinet was established and the state organization started to be structured, the declaration of the state was officially announced in the Sunni-dominated regions of Iraq. The reason for this was to have the people dictate their own understanding and interpretation of Islam in the region where the state dominated. There were many rules such as compulsory beard growth for men, gender discrimination against women, and prohibition of alcohol use. Those who did not comply with these rules were either arrested, forced to work under very harsh conditions, or killed. Along with all these, the organization started to increase its terrorist activities by using explosive-laden vehicles and suicide bombers against American soldiers and Shiites since 2007. While nearly 10,000 of people lost their lives in nearly 200 attacks between 2007 and 2010, this situation prompted the Iraqi government to act. When the dates show, in 2010, Abu Omar al-Baghdadi was killed in the city of Salatin in an air attack organized by the American-backed Iraqi security forces, while Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi was appointed as the head of the organization. During this period, the United States changed its method in the fight against terrorist groups in Iraq and started to provide salaries and weapons support to the local people in return for their fight against the organizations. This worked so well that it enabled some Sunni groups fighting alongside the people to switch sides with the Islamic State of Iraq. As this new strategy of the USA succeeded in weakening the power of the Islamic State of Iraq, the number of militants, which was thought to approach 15,000 in 2010, fell to 1,000 in 2011. However, the Arab Spring, which broke out in Tunisia during this period when the organization was in the process of disintegration and that spread to all Arab countries, benefited ISIS. While the effects of the Arab Spring began to be felt in 2011, the uprisings that started on March 15, 2011, spread throughout the country in April. For the organization, this civil war meant a great chance for the Islamic State, which it aimed to establish in Iraq, to include Syria. When rebellions against Bashar al-Assad began in Syria, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi sent al-Salvani to Syria to organize the organization's branch in the Syrian front. Al-Salvani, who came to the Hasakah region of Syria, established the al-Nusra Front, the Syrian branch of the organization, and carried out 600 bombing actions in the same year. As for Iraq, Iraqi Prime Minister Maliki tried to fill the power vacuum that emerged with the US decision to withdraw from Iraq in 2011. However, Maliki began to exclude many high-ranking Sunni politicians from the government and arrested them for various reasons in order to strengthen the Shiite dominance in the country. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, who turned the situation into opportunity, started to gain strength by accelerating his actions. Since the Iraqi government could not fully control the region, the organization succeeded in gaining power in Sunni cities such as Salatin, Anbar, Nineveh, and Diyala, and gaining the support of the people. In July 2012, Baghdadi issued a new order to the militants of the organization. The first is simultaneous attack with bomb-laden vehicles and suicide bombers against Shiites, and the second is to help Sunnis escape by raiding prisons. By the order of Baghdadi, Nearly 10 bombings were carried out in a short period of 2 days, and more than 100 people lost their lives. In addition, many prisoners were abducted and joined the ranks of the organization, and this event was an important factor in increasing the power of the organization. The most extensive prison attack of the terrorist organization was on the Abu Ghraib prison on July 21, 2013. During the raid, 13 bomb-laden vehicles were detonated. The prison was bombed with more than 100 rocket launchers and mortars, and 8 suicide bombers blew themselves up in the prison yard. While more than 100 security forces lost their lives in this brutal attack, nearly 1,000 detainees were kidnapped and taken under the aegis of the organization. On March 4, 2013, the organization, which took control of Raqqa, Syria's rich oil city, further strengthened by seizing many weapons and ammunition left over from the fleeing Syrian soldiers. In a message published in April 2013, al-Baghdadi declared that the new goal of the Islamic State of Iraq is to expand into Syria, and that the organization has changed its name to the Islamic State of Iraq and Damascus from now on. While the actions organized by the ISIS in 2013 felt like a bombshell on war's agenda, the leader of Al-Qaeda in this period made an apparent statement and announced that they had no connection with ISIS. When the dates showed May 11, 2013, 52 people lost their lives in the terrorist attack in the Reyhanli district of Hatay province in Turkey, and the attack was not claimed by ISIS. However, since the suspects caught as a result of the work of the Turkish intelligence turned out to be ISIL militants, it was obvious that this attack was organized by ISIS. Continuing to get stronger by raiding prisons day by day, ISIS occupied parts of Deir ez-Zor, Manbij, and Kobani until 2004. Thus, ISIS captured the Syrian-Iraqi borders and especially the areas where oil fields are available. According to the UN Security Council report in 2004, the organization deployed in Iraq and Syria had a total of around 50,000 militants, approximately 20,000 of whom were from different countries. According to this result, ISIS had become the most dangerous jihadist organization in the world by getting ahead of Al-Qaeda. With the first months of 2014, ISIS accelerated its attacks in Iraq and captured parts of Fallujah, Samarra, and Ramadi, thus taking over 3/4 of Iraq's Sunni regions. The organization launched one of its biggest attacks on Mosul, Iraq's second largest city, with a population of over 2 million on June 10, 2014. The organization, which attacked the Iraqi army with 500 vehicles and 2,000 militants against the 60,000-strong Iraqi army, entered Mosul and took over the city, astonishing the whole world. During the occupation, 49 Turkish citizens were taken hostage by the organization along with the officials in the Mosul consulate. The Turkish Foreign Ministry, which took action immediately, managed to save the hostages 3 months later on September 20, 2014, with the operation it organized through the National Intelligence Agency. Because the city was rich in the strategic crossing points, trade routes, water, and oil resources, ISIS had further increased its power and influence. After these developments, on 29 June 2014, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi announced in a speech in Mosul that he had established the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria and declared himself the Islamic Caliph. After the declaration of the Islamic State, Caliph Baghdadi took action to seize new territories in order to consolidate his presence in the areas controlled by ISIS. For this purpose, he not only occupied the areas where the Sunni group was concentrated in Iraq, but also increased his attacks to seize the Iraqi capital, Baghdad. As the regions occupied by the organization in mid-2014 covered 1/3 of Iraq and Syria, the gravity of the situation led to the establishment of an international alliance under the leadership of the United States. While the preparations for the operation were started, Obama was now willing to send the American army to Iraq once again. That's why he decided to help the Iraqi land forces from the air against ISIS. He also stated that they will provide training, intelligence, and material support to Iraqi army and the Peshmerga, and that American military advisors will work in Iraq to organize them, stating that besides Iraq, they will not deal with the Assad regime to combat the ISIS presence in Syria. Obama announced that they will instead provide military assistance to the opposition in Syria, namely the PYD. The military aid provided by the USA to the Iraqi central government, the Kurdish regional government, and the PYD. Iran to Iraqi central government and the Assad regime. Turkey to the Free Syrian Army, and the Russia to the Assad regime. All this caused ISIS to be under pressure on many fronts at the same time. In addition, the organization suffered an inevitable military defeat as a result of the air operations of the International Alliance and the operations carried out by the forces supported by this alliance. The terrorist organization started to target the countries participating in these operations and started to organize bombing actions outside of Iraq and Syria. France was at the forefront of the targeted countries because it provided significant support to the air attacks against ISIS. On 13 November 2015, 128 civilians lost their lives and more than 300 were injured in bomb and gun attacks in different parts of Paris. While the organization did not claim a major attack against Turkey from the date of its establishment until 2015, this situation changed after Turkey took part in the coalition against it. On 20th July 2015, 34 people, including the attacker, were killed and more than 100 people were injured in the attack, which was carried out in Suruç district of Şanlıurfa province when the bomb on the suicide bomber detonated. As the wounds of this attack could not be healed, the bloody terrorist organization targeted Ankara this time. On October 10, 2015, a peace meeting was held in Altındağ district of Ankara with the participation of many non-governmental organizations. At 10 o'clock, two explosions took place 3 seconds apart in an area close to Ankara train station. In this explosion, which went down in history as the deadliest terrorist attack in the history of Republic of Turkey, 109 people lost their lives and more than 500 people were injured. After this date, the terrorist organization carried out many large and small attacks on Turkish soil, and one of its biggest attacks was carried out at Atatürk Airport in Istanbul. On June 28, 2016, around 9:30 p.m., 3 ISIS militants first blazed away with long-barreled weapons and then detonated the bomb on them. 45 people lost their lives in the attack. Nearly 250 civilians were injured. Taking action after these terrorist attacks, the Turkish government ordered the Turkish armed forces to launch an operation in northern Syria. As a result of the operation called Euphrates Shield, cities such as Jarablus, El-Bab, and Dabik were cleared of ISIS and PYD, while the connection of the terrorist organizations with the Turkish border was completely cut off. As a result of many air and ground operations carried out under the leadership of the United States until the end of 2016, significant blows were dealt to both the economic and military power of ISIS. As US-backed Iraqi army and PYD, the Russian-backed Assad regime conducted successful operations against it. The organization lost a significant amount of territory until the beginning of 2017. By the end of 2017, the organization lost 80% of its territory as a result of air operations by coalition forces and operations organized by central governments. In the following years, the government in Iraq succeeded in ensuring the territorial integrity of the country, but the same did not happen for Syria. While the PYD, another US-backed terrorist organization, seized the regions where ISIS was withdrawn, Assad became the owner of 2/3 of the country's territory. When the date showed October 26, 2019, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi was hiding in the Barisha village of Idlib, Syria, and his location was determined by the American army. As a result of the operation held on the same day, he detonated his bomb-laden vest, killing himself and his family members. Thus, in 2014, ISIS, the richest terrorist organization in the world with a fortune of $2 billion, was largely neutralized. As of September 2022, although the lands held by the ISIS terrorist organization constitute a very small part of Syria and Iraq, the organization still carries out occasional bomb attacks. To summarize, the last 50 years of the Middle East, as long as the oil doesn't run out in this geography, the means will change, but the goals will not. See you in the next